Good morning, my friends. Welcome to our New Testament challenge. Today I'm going to be sharing some thoughts on the second chapter of Romans. And like yesterday, in the first chapter of Romans, we talked about how Paul just kind of dove right in. Didn't have a whole lot of time to preamble, but wanted to deal with some serious issues, and he continues with that in chapter 2. It's a topic that many of us in today's church, although some really focus on that, but it's something that myself, maybe and other more mainline Protestant pastors don't talk a lot about, but it's God's judgment, and it is. And he talks about how God's judgment is righteous. It is based on the rightness of God, and that we need to understand that. And that's part of what makes the gospel and grace and forgiveness so powerful, is that sin, we are judged by the sins that we keep, the sins that we commit. And so he spends this whole chapter talking about his judgment, and the judgment of Gentiles and the judgment of Jews. Gentiles were without the law, and so their judgment is based upon unrighteousness, their actions. The Jews' judgment, they were judged according to the law, and even if they kept every iota and crossed every T and dotted every I, just their self-righteousness. He talks about that, about the others, about the Gentiles. They kind of look down on them because, we're God's favorite children. And so even though the sins are different, Gentiles versus Jews, and then we can insert any group or groups that we want. My sins are different than your sins. Your sins are different than her sins. Her sins are different than his sins, and we can go on. All of us lie under judgment, and it's not because God is a harsh God, but he clearly lays out his laws. He clearly understands, and he lays out these laws because he knows the harm that they do, the things that we do, and so it as we talked about earlier, sin breaks relationships. Anytime we sin, we push ourselves away from God, and it is all on our side. God is faithful, God is steadfast, we know what is expected, and so when we intentionally disobey, we are pushing him away. And so his judgment is righteous, and we have to face it at the end of days, and we'll get into it a little bit later. This is the first part of an argument, but we know that Christ's suffering, death, and resurrection paid for our judgment, paid for our condemnation. And so for that, we are extremely thankful. So today is talking about the seriousness of our sin. And sometimes it's good to think about that, to reflect on that, to consider our sin, and not to wallow in it, not to dwell in it, but to consider the effects it can have on our life. And then think about it in context of God's grace and what Jesus has done for us. So, hope that has helped. This is some tough stuff, but very important stuff. Thanks a lot, my friends, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.